Long before the United States was born, before the first European sails brushed its shores, vast and intricate civilizations thrived across this land. Civilizations that built cities from clay, aligned temples with the stars, and vanished into silence. Tonight, let us wander through their forgotten paths, uncovering secrets that still hum beneath the soil of America's ancient heart. Beneath the soft whisper of the American wind, where tall grass rolls like waves upon an ancient sea, there lies a world few have seen and fewer still remember. The plains of the Midwest, serene, endless, and quiet, keep their secrets well. But if you listen closely, when the night is still and the stars shimmer over the Mississippi, you might just hear them, the faint, distant echoes of a civilization that once lived, breathed, and dreamed beneath these very fields. For thousands of years before European footsteps marked the soil, people thrived here, not nomads or wanderers, but builders, astronomers, and artists. They raised vast earthen mounds that touched the horizon, shaping them into birds that seemed to fly when the sun rose, into serpents that slithered with the shadows at dusk, and into perfect circles that mirrored the stars above. These were the mound builders, a name given long after their voices faded, but their silence still hums beneath the plains. The story begins along the great rivers, the Mississippi and the Ohio, lifelines of an older world. Here water meant more than survival. It was the pulse of existence. Each bend in the river, each island, each soft bank carried memory. Settlements rose like beads on a necklace, strung along the river's shimmering thread. Their homes were made from earth and wood, humble yet lasting, and around them grew cities. Yes, cities alive with trade, ceremony, and song. Imagine, if you will, the great city of Cahokia, near where St. Louis stands today. Around the year 1000 CE, it may have been larger than London. At its heart towered a massive earthen pyramid, Monk's Mound, as tall as a 10-story building built not from stone but from millions of basketfuls of packed soil. Workers, day after day, hand by hand, built a mountain to touch the heavens. On top stood a temple, not of gold or marble, but of wood and clay open to the wind and sky. At dawn, the people would gather in silence, watching the sun rise behind the horizon poles, perfectly aligned with the seasons. Their priests or astronomers perhaps would trace the path of the stars, recording not in ink but in shadow and flame. They knew the rhythm of time not through clocks or calendars but through the breath of nature itself. The floods, the winds, the bird migrations, all told stories that their elders could read as easily as we read words. Life here was not rushed. It was cyclical, woven with patience. The fields of maize, beans, and squash grew in harmony. The three sisters, they called them, each helping the other flourish. In the evenings, fires flickered along the riverbanks. Children played while elders told stories of the world's beginning, of the great serpent who shaped the rivers, and the sky woman who fell from the clouds to plant the first seed. Trade routes stretched far, copper from the Great Lakes, seashells from the Gulf of Mexico, obsidian from the Rockies. How they reached each other across such distance remains a mystery, yet the artifacts prove their connection. The mound builders were not isolated tribes. They were part of a vast web, a living network of culture and spirit that spanned the continent. And yet, they left behind no written word. Their histories are whispered in pottery shards, in the way a mound curves like a sleeping giant, in carvings that gaze silently from stone. The Serpent Mound in Ohio, one of the most haunting relics, still winds across the earth for more than 1,000 feet. Its coils align with the solstices, its head facing the setting sun. Was it a calendar? A temple? A warning? No one truly knows. All we know is that whoever built it looked not down at the earth but up, always up, toward the sky. When modern archaeologists first unearthed these sites, they could hardly believe they were man-made. To them, America's early people were simple, nomadic. How could they have built cities, observed the stars, shaped the land so precisely? But the soil itself told another story, a story of ingenuity, patience, and sacred connection to the land. It is easy now, sitting in our modern homes surrounded by clocks and noise, to forget that time once moved differently. In the world of the mound builders, life was measured not in minutes or years, but in seasons and songs. A full moon was not a date, it was a ceremony. A harvest was not an economic event, it was gratitude. The land was not property, it was kin. Every river bend had a spirit, every hill a purpose, every silence a meaning. But even great civilizations fall silent. Around the 14th century, the mound cities began to empty. The fields went wild. The fires went out. Perhaps it was drought or disease or conflict. Or perhaps the people simply followed the river of time somewhere new, leaving behind their mounds as offerings to the earth that raised them. Centuries passed. The grass grew tall. The wind erased their footprints. By the time European settlers arrived, the mounds had become part of the landscape, ancient, nameless, and patient. Some thought giants had built them. Others said they were graves of lost tribes. But the truth was simpler and deeper. They were echoes of the plains themselves, the dreams of those who once walked here when the world was still young. Today, the air above these places feels different. Stand near the Serpent Mound at sunset, or on the grassy top of Monk's Mound in Cahokia, and you might feel it, the faint vibration of something older than memory. It's not a sound exactly, but a hum, like the land remembering itself. The birds go quiet, the horizon glows gold, and for a brief, weightless moment you can almost hear them. The songs, the drums, the laughter that once rolled across the river like thunder and drifted away into time. In this silence, there is peace. In this peace, a lesson. The mound builders lived in balance, not perfect, not eternal, but gentle. They understood that everything built upon the earth must someday return to it. And though their names are lost, their spirit endures in the very shape of the land. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine the plains at twilight, the tall grass swaying, the river catching the last red light of the sun, the earth beneath you older than any dream, and somewhere far beneath the surface a heartbeat, slow, steady, eternal, the heartbeat of a civilization that never truly disappeared, only went quiet, waiting for someone to listen again. High above the desert floor, where red rocks blush beneath the slow-setting sun, lie the silent homes of a people who once watched the stars as if they were old friends. The cliffs and canyons of the American Southwest hold stories etched not on paper, but in stone, clay, and wind. The Ancestral Puebloans, sometimes called the Anasazi, lived here for centuries, carving their lives into the high desert walls. Today, their abandoned dwellings still cling to the cliffs, whispering of a world that balanced between earth and sky. The journey begins at Chaco Canyon, a place that feels like a dream carved into the desert itself. The air here hums softly, and the stones glow orange in the evening light. Once this canyon was the beating heart of a vast civilization, a network of roads, temples, and dwellings that stretched for hundreds of miles. Thousands lived here, trading turquoise, pottery, feathers, and stories across distances that seem impossible for such an ancient time. But Chaco was not only a city of trade, it was a city of the cosmos. Its builders aligned their great houses and ceremonial kivas with the movement of the sun and moon, as if the heavens were their architects. Imagine the night sky in those days, dark as ink, jeweled with stars that shimmered like sacred fire. The people of Chaco watched the heavens from their great houses, Pueblo Bonito, Chetroquetl, and Casa Rinconada. observing how the sun would rise between distant rock formations at the solstices, marking the passage of time. They carved spiral symbols on canyon walls where a thin shaft of sunlight would pass perfectly through on the longest and shortest days of the year. To them, the sky was not distant. It was part of their architecture, part of their spirit. The horizon itself was a calendar written in light. The homes of these people were made from clay, sandstone, and timber, shaped by hand into towers that touched the clouds. High on the cliffs, families built small villages, clusters of rooms connected by ladders and windows that caught the cool morning breeze. From below, the structures look almost like natural extensions of the rock itself, as if the cliffs had decided to grow homes of their own. Life here was difficult, yet peaceful. The people farmed corn, beans, and squash in the dry soil, channeling water through clever systems of ditches and reservoirs. They raised turkeys, crafted pottery that still glows with beauty, and wove baskets strong enough to hold the weight of years. To live here meant to live in rhythm, with the wind, the sun, the rain, and the silence. Each dawn was a prayer, each evening a time to listen. The desert taught patience and the stars taught wonder. When the monsoon clouds gathered, drums would echo through the canyons as the people gave thanks for rain. In those moments, the land itself seemed to breathe. Even now, if you stand alone among the ruins at twilight, you can almost feel the presence of those who came before, their footsteps soft in the dust, their laughter carried by the wind through hollow windows. Chaco's people were master architects, but they were also dreamers. Their cities were not just homes, they were reflections of the cosmos. Each great kiva, a circular ceremonial chamber sunk into the earth, symbolized the underworld, the womb of creation. To enter it was to descend into the memory of the world. Fires burned there. Songs rose in spirals and stories flowed like rivers of light. The ceremonies connected them to their ancestors and the spirits of nature, the sky people, the rainmakers, and the guardians of the four directions. Through ritual and story, they held the balance of life and death, sky and soil. Farther west and north in the canyons of Mesa Verde, the story continues. There, tucked beneath towering sandstone cliffs, are the cliff dwellings, places like Cliff Palace, Spruce Tree House, and Balcony House. To reach them, one must climb steep ladders or crawl through narrow tunnels carved by time and hands. The architecture here is breathtaking. Rooms stacked like honeycombs, walls painted with handprints, and kivas built in hidden alcoves. From their homes, the Puebloans could see the whole valley spread below, shimmering under the desert sun. These people were engineers and astronomers, artists and farmers, and they left behind a legacy of silence more powerful than any monument. No one knows exactly why they left. Around the late 1200s, the cities began to empty. Droughts came. The rains no longer followed their sacred calendar. Crops withered and trade routes fell silent. Some believe conflict or scarcity drove them away. Others think they followed spiritual visions guided by ancestors to new lands. Whatever the reason, they did not vanish. Their descendants live on today in the modern Pueblo tribes of New Mexico and Arizona. The Hopi, Zuni, Acoma, and others. They still tell stories of emergence from the underworld, of harmony with the four directions, of a time when the world was young and people spoke to the sky. If you listen closely, you can still hear echoes of those stories in the wind that moves through the canyon stones. The Puebloans believed that every part of nature was alive, that the rocks had memory, the rivers had voices, and the stars were watching. When they built their homes in the cliffs, they weren't just seeking shelter. They were becoming part of the landscape, merging human life with the eternal patterns of the earth. Their clay cities were not meant to defy time, but to flow with it, slowly dissolving back into sand and silence. As the night deepens over the desert, Imagine sitting by the ruins of Pueblo Bonito, where the shadows of ancient walls stretch long and soft under the moonlight. The wind sighs through the windows and the scent of sage drifts by. Somewhere a nightbird calls. You look up and the stars are impossibly bright. The same stars the ancient builders once watched, marking the passage of their seasons. Their eyes, like yours, might have lingered on the same constellation, wondering about their place in the great design. In that moment, you begin to understand something they always knew. That the earth and sky are not separate realms, that clay and cloud belong to the same story, and that even the smallest dwelling, if built with reverence, can touch eternity. In the deep hush of twilight, when the last light of the sun melts into the horizon, the first breath of the sacred fire begins to stir. Its smoke curls upward, slow and graceful, reaching toward the heavens as though it remembers something older than time itself. Around this gentle flame the people gather, faces lit in gold and shadow, eyes soft with reflection. Here, in this flickering circle of warmth, the old world still breathes. The sacred fire was never just a flame. It was a living being, a heartbeat of the earth. Among many Native American tribes, the Cherokee, Hopi, Lakota, and others, fire was seen as the bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds. Its light connected humans to the sky, and its smoke carried prayers to the unseen realms. To sit before it was to sit before one's ancestors, to speak not only to the living but to all who came before. In that circle of glow and silence, time did not move forward. It spiraled, like the smoke itself, looping endlessly between past, present, and future. For the Cherokee, the sacred fire was called Ahiv, and it symbolized the sun, the source of all life. In the center of each town stood the council fire, tended carefully, never allowed to die. Every flame that burned in homes across the village was taken from this central fire, as though each household carried a piece of the same eternal spirit. When the council met, they would sit in a circle facing inward, because truth, they believed, lives at the center, not at the edge. The fire's light revealed that no one stood above another. All were equal before its warmth. The Cherokee elders would often begin their councils by sprinkling tobacco or cedar into the flames. The smoke that rose was more than scent. It was a message sent to the Creator, a quiet acknowledgement that every life is woven from the same breath of fire and ash. They said that the sacred flame listens, that it holds memory. If you whisper your story to it, the smoke carries it upward to join the great cloud of all stories told before. Far to the west, under the endless sky of the Hopi mesas, the fire burned for a different yet kindred reason. The Hopi saw fire as one of the keepers of balance, a teacher reminding them that creation and destruction live side by side. Their ceremonies often began in darkness deep within kivas, underground chambers representing the womb of the earth. There the firelight flickered across the walls as chants began, slow and rhythmic like a heartbeat returning to the soil. The Hopi fire ceremonies were not just rituals. They were renewals of harmony between worlds. The fire was fed not only with wood but with intention. Cornmeal, feathers, prayers whispered into smoke. To the Hopi, each spark was a star reborn, and each ember was a soul returning to the great circle of existence. When the dancers emerged into the open night, their shadows swirled with the flames, moving in patterns that echoed constellations above. To watch it was to witness the sky descending into the earth, if only for a moment. In the northern plains, the Lakota people carried the same reverence for the sacred fire. During the sun dance, one of their most profound ceremonies, a central fire was kept alive through days of prayer and endurance. Around it, dancers circled, their eyes lifted to the sun, offering their strength and sacrifice to maintain the harmony of all life. The Lakota saw time not as a line but as a sacred hoop, a circle without beginning or end. To dance, to pray, to breathe. All of it was part of the same eternal movement. They told stories by firelight of white buffalo calf woman, the spirit who brought them the pipe and the laws of living in harmony. Her gift taught them that all things are connected, the fire to the sun, the water to the blood, the wind to the breath, the earth to the flesh. To break one bond was to wound the whole circle. When they spoke of creation, they spoke softly, not as a single moment, but as something happening still with every sunrise, every flame, every heartbeat. In these fires, and Cherokee, Hopi, Lakota burned the same truth. That time does not rush like a river. It turns gently, like the earth itself, forever returning. The elders would say, "We do not live behind our ancestors, we live beside them." Around the sacred fire, this was not a metaphor when it was felt. The warmth on one's skin was the warmth of those who once sat in the same circle. Their breath mingled with the smoke, and their presence shimmered in the light between shadows. Even today, if you were to sit in silence before such a fire, somewhere on a quiet night in the high desert or the Great Plains, you might sense that same presence. The fire's voice is not loud, yet it speaks with a patience older than language. It crackles like laughter, sighs like memory, and glows with something that feels almost alive. The air smells faintly of cedar and sage, of earth after rain, of stories that refuse to die. The tribes believed that to keep the sacred fire burning was to keep the world in balance. When it went out, something in the spirit faltered, so they tended it not out of superstition but out of understanding, that every flame mirrors the sun, and the sun mirrors the eternal fire that beats in all living things. Each dawn, when the first light touches the land, it is as though the great fire in the sky is rekindled once more. Children would sit close to the warmth, their eyes wide as the elders spoke in slow, measured tones. The stories were never told to thrill or excite. They were told to calm, to teach through quiet. One might hear of the time when the first people emerged from beneath the earth, guided by the flame of a great spirit who showed them how to walk in balance. Another night the story might be of the trickster coyote, who stole fire for humankind so they would never be cold again. These tales were not just entertainment, they were medicine, guiding each generation toward humility and patience. When the night grew late and the last log collapsed into embers, there would be no rush to leave. The people lingered, watching the glow dim slowly, their thoughts drifting with the sparks that rose into the stars. Some said that every spark that vanished was a soul returning home. Others said it was a promise, that nothing truly disappears, it only changes form. Even in the modern world, where cities glow brighter than the stars once did, the old wisdom of the sacred fire still lingers. Many native communities continue to light ceremonial fires, not as relics of the past but as living prayers. The circle remains unbroken. The flames may burn in metal bowls now instead of earthen pits, but their purpose has not changed. To remind people that life is sacred, time is circular, and every breath belongs to the same endless rhythm. When the wind moves across the plains or whispers through desert canyons, some say it carries traces of those ancient songs, the chants that once rose with the smoke. You can almost hear them if you listen in stillness, a low hum, a gentle heartbeat beneath the noise of the world. It is the voice of the sacred fire, whispering across centuries, reminding us to slow down, to breathe, to remember. Because in the end, all fires, the ones in the hearth, the heart, or the heavens, tell the same story. They burn for a while, they change shape, and then they return. The circle closes softly only to open again, and in that quiet return lies the deepest kind of peace. The peace that puts the soul and perhaps the listener gently to sleep. There comes a time in every great story when the voices begin to fade, The drums that once echoed through the valleys grow softer. The fires that once glowed in the night dim into embers. The people still walk the land, but their songs begin to drift, like smoke thinning in a quiet dawn. This is how the old civilizations of the native world began to fall silent, not with war cries or thunder, but with the long sigh of the earth itself. Long before foreign ships touched the shores of the New World, a slower, quieter transformation had already begun. The great cities of clay and stone, Chaco Canyon, Cahokia, Mesa Verde, had started to empty. Their plazas, once alive with traders and storytellers, grew still beneath the endless sky. Crops withered in fields that once shimmered green. Rivers changed their courses as if turning away from what they no longer recognized. And yet, to those who lived close to the earth, it did not feel like a fall. It felt like a return. The Hopi tell that the spirits who built the great stone houses simply moved deeper into the mesas, carrying their wisdom with them. The Cherokee speak of migrations guided by dreams, not disasters. The Lakota say that when the world grows too loud, the spirits choose silence so that humans may remember how to listen again. In the dry heat of the desert, wind became the last storyteller. It moved through the hollow kivas, whispering through rooms where the sun painted golden squares on the walls. Sometimes it sounded like laughter, sometimes like weeping. Archaeologists today call it abandonment, but perhaps it was something gentler, a soft fading, a retreat into harmony rather than chaos. In Chaco Canyon, the great roads that once stretched for miles now lead nowhere. They run straight and true, carved through dust and stone, connecting the remains of what were once shining ceremonial centers. Under the moonlight, they gleam faintly, like scars or memory lines on the body of the earth. Some say they were meant not for feet but for spirits, paths of light for those who had crossed into the other world. When the rain stopped coming, the people did not curse the sky. They gathered in council circles, prayed, and waited. For them, drought was not punishment but conversation, the land speaking in a different tongue. Some followed the rivers eastward, carrying the sacred fire with them, small embers wrapped in bark. Others went west to the high cliffs, seeking refuge among the stones. Everywhere they went, they carried songs that told the land who they were and asked permission to stay. Generations passed. Villages became smaller. The great gatherings turned into family fires, and then into single flames burning quietly in the night. But those who remained never saw themselves as forsaken. They believed that the great spirits, the ones who once danced in storms and spoke through thunder, had simply grown tired of noise. That they had gone to sleep deep in the soil, dreaming new worlds into being. There is a Hopi tale that tells of a time when the people could hear the earth breathe. They say the great spirits, seeing that humans had forgotten stillness, withdrew their voices. The silence that followed was not emptiness, it was a test. To see whether the people could remember how to speak without words, how to listen without ears. The Hopi say that if you stand very still on the mesas at dusk, you can still feel that breathing beneath your feet. Far to the north, among the forests and plains, other nations faced the same quiet change. The mounds of the Mississippi people, once temples, homes, observatories, grew over with grass. Birds nested where kings once stood. The great wooden palisades of Cahokia fell and rotted, and deer began to wander through the streets. Nature took everything back with such patience, such grace, that even the ruins seemed to smile in their surrender. In those days, the world did not end. It shifted. The people who left the cities became wanderers again, as their ancestors once were. They followed herds, rivers, the stars. The sacred circle, which had always turned, simply completed another rotation. What seemed to vanish was only changing form. When the Europeans finally arrived, they found no towering cities or gleaming stone temples. They assumed the continent was empty of civilization, that its people were primitive. But they did not understand the deeper rhythm of the land. The true greatness of these nations had never been in their buildings. It had been in their harmony, their understanding that everything rises and falls, blooms and withers, speaks and falls silent. Somewhere in the vast plains, an old man tended a small fire. He told the children around him that once, long ago, the Spirit spoke through wind and thunder. But when men forgot how to listen, the spirits chose to whisper instead, through rustling leaves, the cry of the hawk, the hush before rain. The spirits didn't die, he said. They became quiet so that we would remember to be humble. And in this quiet, something sacred was born: endurance. Tribes adapted, moved, rebuilt. They wove silence into their stories, patience into their prayers. Even as colonization came, waves of steel, smoke, and sorrow, the old understanding survived in whispers and songs. The people learned to hide their ceremonies in plain sight, to keep their languages burning like embers beneath ash. In the Lakota tongue, there is a phrase, "Mitakuye oyasing," all my relations. It is a prayer, a truth, and a farewell all at once. It reminds that everything is connected: the fire, the sky, the silence, even the loss. When the great spirits fell silent, they did not abandon creation. They became it. Every gust of wind, every river's curve, every quiet dawn became their new voice. Now, centuries later, the descendants of those ancient peoples still light fires, still sing to the dawn, still walk the old paths. They say the spirits never stopped speaking. We simply stopped hearing. But if you go far enough into the wild, where no engines hum, where the air smells of sage and the night sky spills with stars, you might hear it again. A low hum in the earth, a soft rustle through the trees, the language of a world that learned to whisper its wisdom. In the ruins of Chaco, when twilight settles and the air cools, the silence feels heavy, but not empty. It feels alive. The stones glow faintly gold, and the wind traces its fingers along their edges, humming a song too deep for words. If you listen long enough, it begins to sound like breath, slow, patient, endless. The great spirits did not fall silent in sorrow. They chose peace over thunder, rest over flame. In their stillness, they became the land itself. The rivers that carve the canyons, the rains that return, the stars that blink like campfires in the sky. And so their silence is not an ending. It is a great remembering, a reminder that life does not vanish when it grows quiet. It simply sinks deeper, waiting to be felt. So as the listener drifts toward sleep, imagine that sacred hush, the embers glowing, the wind moving through empty temples, the earth breathing beneath you. The story does not end here. It simply exhales, slowly, softly, and turns once more in the eternal circle of fire, sky, and silence. If you stand in the middle of an open plain in America, where the grass ripples like water and the horizon stretches until it blurs into the sky, you might think there is nothing there. No cities, no voices, just wind and silence. But if you stand long enough and breathe slowly enough, you'll begin to feel it. A presence beneath the quiet, like a heartbeat in the soil. The land remembers. It remembers everything. Long before highways and fences, before steel rails crossed the earth, this land was a living story. Every stone had a name, every river a voice. The forest breathed in rhythm with the people who walked them. The stars were not distant fires, but ancestors keeping watch. Even now, beneath the hum of airplanes and the rumble of trucks, the echo of that old language lingers. The land speaks softly but never stops. In the wide deserts of Arizona and New Mexico, the cliffs still hold the marks of ancient hands. You can see them in faded ochre, the spiral carvings that map the sun's journey. the handprints pressed by children centuries ago. When the evening wind moves through the canyons, it sounds almost like voices rising in song. Some call it coincidence, others know better. The wind is still carrying memory. On quiet nights, when the moonlight turns the plains silver, the outlines of old trails emerge. Buffalo once thundered across them, guided by invisible lines older than maps. Native hunters followed in silence, their feet moving in rhythm with the earth's own pulse. Today those trails lie beneath asphalt and cornfields. But they are not gone, they are only sleeping, like old rivers that still flow underground. In the heartland, where wheat now bends under wind instead of tallgrass prairie, lie the mounds, the sacred earthworks of the ancient builders. Most passers-by never notice them. They rise only a few feet from the ground, soft and round, covered in wildflowers. But if you stand upon one and close your eyes, the air feels different. Time folds a little. You can almost hear drums from somewhere far away, or maybe just the low hum of the planet itself. Archaeologists measure and map, but the people who still remember know these are not ruins, they are resting places of memory. Even the mountains remember. The Appalachians, old and worn, cradle stories from when the first peoples crossed ice and forest. In the misty dawn, the ridges seem to breathe. They have seen centuries of laughter, prayer, and struggle, and they still hold it in their silence. In the Pacific Northwest, rain falls like blessing water, washing through cedar groves that once held the poles and longhouses of tribes, whose names still echo in rivers and towns. In these lands, time never truly moves forward, it circles. The past and the present are layers of the same dream. When settlers came and built new towns, they did not erase the old world. They built upon it. Beneath every field, beneath every city, the bones of ancient fire still lie sleeping. Sometimes they surface, a shard of pottery, a flint blade, a faint pattern in the soil after rain. And for a moment, the veil of time grows thin. Modern America rushes fast, too fast, perhaps to hear the soft rhythm beneath its feet. But for those who pause, the reminders are everywhere. The Mississippi still murmurs the same song it sang to the mound builders. The desert stars still hang over the ruins of Chaco Canyon in the same quiet patterns. Even the wind across the prairies hums the same notes that once carried the whispers of shamans and storytellers. You can hear it in unexpected places too. In the hollow echo of a canyon, in the sigh of wind through pine trees, in the hush that falls over a wheat field at dusk. The land is still whispering its old names, still humming the same lullaby that once put entire tribes to sleep under open skies. Sometimes, memory lingers in the small things, a feather caught in sagebrush, the smell of rain on red dirt, the flicker of a campfire reflected in a stream. To the old tribes, these were not coincidences. They were conversations. The world spoke constantly if one only knew how to listen. And perhaps that is still true. The land doesn't forget. It waits patiently for us to remember again. There are stories that the stars above the plains still remember the old songs. The Pawnee once read constellations not for destiny but for balance, each star a guardian spirit. And though the names have changed, the sky has not. The same stars that guided the ancient travelers now shine over quiet highways and suburban rooftops. The heavens keep no allegiance to time. They shine equally on the old and the new, on memory and forgetting alike. In the deserts of the Southwest, archaeologists still find painted pottery fragments, swirls of turquoise, clay, and red. To most, they are relics. To some, they are letters in an unfinished sentence, pieces of a story the land is still trying to tell. Every grain of dust, every stone, carries a trace of the hands that shaped it, of the hearts that once believed the earth itself was alive, and perhaps it still is. When the wind moves through the prairie grass, it doesn't just make sound, it sings. It tells of buffalo that once grazed in endless herds, of fires that lit the night sky, of rain dances that called back clouds from the horizon. It tells of laughter, birth, loss, and renewal. If you lie back and close your eyes, the grass itself seems to breathe, slow and steady, like the pulse of something eternal. The modern world calls it emptiness, but the native elders call it fullness, the fullness of the land spirit which carries everything it has seen and lost and loved. There's a Lakota saying, "The land is the storyteller. We are only the echoes." In that way, America itself, beneath all its noise and restlessness, is an echo of something older, softer, wiser. The highways follow ancient trails. The towns stand where old fires once burned. The rivers flow through the same bends they always have. Civilization may have changed its language, but the story remains the same. And when night falls, the remembering grows stronger. The air cools, the stars unfold, and the silence thickens. That's when the past feels closest, like a dream returning just before sleep. You can almost imagine the faint outlines of those who came before. Hunters walking along a ridge, a mother grinding corn in a clay bowl, a child tracing constellations in the dust. They are not gone. They are only quieter now. The land does not mourn them, it carries them. Every sunrise is a prayer, every river a reflection. The spirits of the old civilizations never truly left. They became the rhythm beneath all things. When you stand barefoot on the soil and feel its warmth, you are touching history. Not the kind written in books, but the kind that breathes through time itself. So as this story drifts toward its end, let it slow, let it quiet, like the wind settling after a long journey. Imagine the plains at twilight, the golden light fading into deep blue, the first stars trembling awake. The world is still. The air smells of dust and sage. Far away, maybe, you hear a coyote call, and underneath it all, the deep and steady heartbeat of the earth. The same pulse that has been there since the first people looked up and called it home. The land still remembers. It remembers every voice, every footprint, every song, and perhaps in the hush between heartbeats, it remembers you too. Your quiet wonder, your listening, your small part in the great, endless story. So close your eyes now. Let the stars fold over you like ancient blankets. The wind is still speaking, softly and slowly, in a language older than time. The story is not ending. It is simply sleeping, waiting for the next dreamer to listen again.